So today we're going to talk about the future of 911 location and mapping. And why did we add the mapping to the title here? 911 location is no longer as big of a problem as it was, say, 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. There were all these conversations about, why can Uber find me but 911 can't? And the reality is that the technology is there, the technology is in place to receive accurate 911 locations in a 911 center. Google and Apple have launched these capabilities more than 2 years ago at this point, and any PSAP, any communication center in the country should have an ability of receiving it. Now the question is, how do you receive it the right way? How can you integrate it into your workflow? How can you make sure that you create the best possible user experience to not just receive accurate location, but to actually receive the right location at the right time in the right format and make it useful for the number one telecommunicator. And as many of you know, every 911 call starts with the question, what's the address of your emergency, or what's the location of your emergency? So having the right location at the right time makes a big difference, because you cut out those valuable seconds. And I'll talk about some use cases where it can even cut out a few minutes. So what does a best-in-class 911 location look like on a map? We kind of have to look at the evolution here a little bit. If you're still talking about displaying accurate location of 911 calls, and maybe integrating it with basic GIS and displaying supplemental data feeds, honestly, that's not enough in 2020. That's 2 years ago. If you had that, I think that would have been a great achievement. But where we are today, we really have to set the bar a lot higher, and we have to offer things that have only become possible quite recently. So today we're going to talk about the present, something that we announced yesterday and something that we released yesterday, and it's available to all of our customers. And the first set of PSAPs has already activated it and is using it in a production capacity, and we'll be switching on more and more over the coming days and weeks. But what we would like to talk to you about today is displaying locations in real time before the call even rings in the 911 center, and then intelligently correlating it together with the information from the 911 phone system, the awareness of which call taker sits on which position, the awareness of which call taker is handling which incident, and even more broadly, which 911 center is handling which incident. Having an ability to visualize 911 calls on the map is only so useful if you don't know who's actually answering the call or whether a call has been answered. And we'll talk about an ability to display which neighboring 911 center or which different 911 center has answered a call that happened in your service area. And then obviously we also talk about the additional data that has, I think, created a little bit of a wave yesterday around, the ability to show medical ID data from companies like Apple, the ability to show the language that the device is set to for Android phones, as well as for some Apple phones. Super exciting stuff. So that's the present. This is no longer a future vision. This has been released. It's available. We'll show you today. And then towards the end of the session, we also want to show you the future. And Brooks will talk about how we can transform the 911 map into something much bigger and kind of move it more to the center of the call taking experience rather than being on the side. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the present. So the feature announcements from yesterday, we want to unpack that a little bit further for you. So most importantly, you can see the location of calls before the phone even rings. And that's important because seconds matter in a 911 call. You will be able to see that somebody has made a 911 call in your service area before your phone starts ringing or before you answer the phone. And that's important because you could see clusters of calls, you could see certain calls coming from different areas, and you have the awareness of what's going on before you even talk to anybody. And in a regular scenario, and we'll see this later, often that pin will show up and a few seconds later, it will get converted into a call that you've received. And the few seconds that you gained here, maybe give you a little bit of a head start, but they're not going to dramatically change the impact of your response times. but there's scenarios in which we can talk about minutes, not seconds. So for instance, we'll talk about a scenario where you see a flurry of 911 calls in your service area and you haven't received a single one of them. And you need to know why. And you can't wait for a secondary PSAP or highway patrol to finally give you a call a few minutes later and tell you, hey, we have a motor vehicle accident with injuries. You could have units on the way already, because you know what's going on there. So let's talk through a few different scenarios in more detail. The first one is seeing a 911 call location before you receive the 911 call. And there's a few different cases in which that could be helpful. For instance, if you receive a call for a major event like an active shooter, you could see all the 911 calls that come from that location in real time on your screen. So you can kind of see who's calling from where, and then you can kind of figure out which agent, which position is answering which call. You can coordinate better with them. You can avoid miscommunications, and you can also see the location of calls that are still in the queue that haven't even been answered. And you'll be able to, if you have the right call handling system, you'll be able to pick out which call do I pick off the queue first. Do I need to pick off, call number 100 from a motor vehicle accident on the freeway, or do I pick that one call that's coming from somewhere else that might be a totally unrelated incident? So lots of exciting stuff that you can do with that. The other thing that I'm super excited about, and Brooks is as well, is you are now able to see the location of a call that got routed to a different agency. And there's a lot of small PSAPs in this country that have a very narrow coverage area, and that coverage area doesn't always match up with the cell sectors and the routing patterns that are determined by E911 or NG911. So you could be seeing 911 calls that happen in your city or in your county, but the 911 call never comes to you because it goes to your neighbor, or it goes to highway patrol, or it gets misrouted somewhere else. Now you'll be able to see that somebody called 911, and you'll be able to also see who answered that 911 call. So when you get that transfer in from your neighbor, you already know where it is and what number it's coming from. And depending on what the situation is, you can give your units a head start. And to make all of this possible, we're introducing a new concept that I want to talk through a little bit in kind of more technical terms. We're used to seeing calls in a 911 center. The 911 center, it's called a public safety answering point. It's very kind of focused on answering calls. But really what we're introducing the concept of a signal in addition to a call. And a signal is an indication that somebody called 911 inside your service area. And a call is when the call actually shows up in your 911 center and you answer it. Now, a signal could become a call. Very often a signal turns into a call a few seconds later, but it doesn't always have to be the case. What if the call never connects? What if the call gets dropped? What if it's a call from a non-service initialized phone and it doesn't make it through properly with all the right data? What if it's a call that gets routed somewhere else? And now, later we'll spin that thought a little bit further and say, why does it have to be a call? What are the things that could be signals that are indicators of a request for emergency assistance that are not a 911 call? And this is where the true vision of NG911 comes through in terms of ability to learn about emergencies in your service area in a way that is detached from your legacy phone system. So super excited stuff here. All right, one more interesting piece of information that we released yesterday that wasn't possible before is we're now able to display supplemental data from the world's most trusted technology companies. So we are able to give 911 call takers a chance to access data from Apple and Google. And that just gives you more situational awareness. And it's not from some kind of app that nobody has installed on their phone. It's from the operating system itself. So it's much more trustworthy. It's available much more often, and it's something that we're very excited about. And especially in times of COVID, it's very important to be able to arm responders with as much information about what's going on scene. So super excited about the responder safety aspect of this as well. So here's an example of additional data from Apple, from the enhanced emergency data service that they offer that we're now integrating with as of yesterday. So iPhone users like myself can put in their medical ID information into their iPhone, and they can elect to share it with 911. It's an opt-in. Obviously, user privacy and security is super important. And if that data is available, call takers can request it. And it's, that's an interesting twist. In all my conversations with call takers, I've learned that you don't want to have all that information pushed on you. Sometimes you want to know it's available, but you only want to request it when it's relevant. So there's going to be a button that says request additional information, and when a call taker wants to request additional data, they can do so. And the type of data that's available is quite rich. There's a lot of information there, depending on what the user puts into their iPhone and what they elect to share. But it could be demographic information about the caller, it could be the language, it could be emergency contacts, medical information, allergies, and also some new concepts around emergency response areas where Apple gives you additional context around where a caller may be located. And I think that's an interesting twist here, that if a caller has entered their home address and they're calling from somewhere very close to that home address, you might be able to get a clue here. Maybe you can't say for sure, but it's an interesting clue to say, well, maybe the caller is located at this address, and there's so much uncertainty associated with it. On the other hand, Google data, additional supplemental data from Android ELS, is going to be available immediately. You don't need to request it. When it's available, it's right there when the call comes in. And there's interesting stuff that's very helpful, like the device language. So if a caller has set their device to, let's say, Croatian, like it is in this example, you immediately know, okay, if the caller doesn't speak English, I need a Croatian translator. You don't have to do the guesswork with a third-party language provider to figure out what language might that even be. You immediately know what language you should try first. And you might not even have to wait for a language translator. Maybe you just use the two-way texting feature that you have in Radius Plus, where you can immediately send a language in English, set it to Croatian, and it's going to show up as Croatian language on the other end. And you can have a two-way conversation in hundreds of languages. So super exciting stuff. Now, enough of me talking and showing PowerPoint presentations. I know a lot of you are here because you want to see a demonstration of the new capabilities. So let me quickly pull another screen in here. Give me 1 second. Here we go. So now we have a demo environment up and running. And Brooks, I will hand the voice over to you and you can guide us through here.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Reinhard. I really appreciate it. And I'm super excited to take just a moment to show what it's going to look like inside of Radius and Radius Plus when 911 callers using compatible Apple and Google Android devices initiate calls. So let's look at what a garden variety 911 call looks like today in the agencies that are literally using this right now. I'm going to simulate what Reinhard has called a signal. We'll see that appear on the map. And when that signal appears on the map, we'll see that signal appear as that little gray map pin with a clock. The clock indicates that we're waiting for a period of time until perhaps a 911 call comes in. Maybe if it doesn't come in, we can manually turn this into a 911 call. But just by virtue of seeing what we see right now, before the phone rings in the 911 center, before it's answered, before a telecommunicator handles it like he or she does today, we can see by looking at that pop-up that the location source is Apple in this case. We have the lat and long. We have an uncertainty. It's a very tight circle as well, 8 meters. 90% confidence with some altitude information, actually. We also have the time that this location update was received, as well as its callback number and when the call itself was initiated. In a live environment, we'll see these location updates come in every few seconds. Maybe it's 5 or 10 seconds. So knowing that time of the location update is really important as well. And we know that the medium was a voice call. Had it been a text to 911 call, it would say SMS. We also show the approximate street address, and we can request additional data if we so choose. In this case, when we click on that button, it's going to go make that request, and we find that there's no additional data available, but had the caller provisioned some additional data into his or her cell phone, that would have showed up. So now let's show what happens when an actual anti-alley spill is received when that 911 call is answered. Radius is going to zoom out to show that location, which is that blue pin, which in this case, if you hover over it, you'll see that it's a wireless phase 1 call. It's 1,709 meters in accuracy. Not very good, certainly worse than the 8 meters of accuracy. And Radius shows the correlation between that supplemental handset location that we received from Apple and the CPE location. It's about 1/10 of a mile apart. If another updated location came in from the handset itself, we would see that on the map. And when we zoom in, we can see that as that additional pin, that red pin. Now we're up to 5 meters of uncertainty. Pretty darn good. And we have that approximate address displayed on the ribbon on the very top of the map. We can request additional data again. We show the coordinates in a variety of formats, including what 3 words. And we can enhance our situational awareness, understanding not only where that caller is, but in relation to prior location updates, both from the handset as well as from the traditional network-based location we get from the 911 system. What I want to do next is show the all calls grid. So if we highlight that, that shows what everybody in the PSAP would see. They would see the agent ID that had taken the call, had answered the call. We see the approximate address, the number. We see an event source on the left. The little handset shows that it's a 911 call in this case. But if I was to leave that open and then simulate another call that was a signal, it would show up just a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do here quickly is simulate that signal. So we can close this call out, we'll clear the map, and then I will send in another signal from imagining someone dialing 911 again from their compatible Apple device. I'll send that in, and we'll see that pop up on the map. Now, if nobody called 911, and this was literally just a pin that appeared within the service area of the PSAP, you can click on that pin, and you can manually convert it to a call inside of Radius. This is really beneficial because it gives you the opportunity to interact with the caller via SMS. You could open up a 2-way video chat if you're using Radius Plus, and you can request location updates from them using our Rapid Locate feature. So this provides a rich set of tools to be able to interact with this caller if, for some reason, you just never get that 911 call. Maybe it's dropped, maybe it's misrouted, what have you. So what I'm going to do now is simulate a few additional calls, but we're going to pretend that these are coming in from callers using a compatible Google device. So let's imagine that someone using a Google Android device called 911. We see a pin again, a signal pin, appear on the map just as the other ones do, but the location source shows Google. If this call is never received as a traditional 911 call and we just see that signal pin, we can continue to see updates occur to that pin in real time. So as that person moves, for example, every few seconds, we can see that pin move, and it's going to continue to track along the map. We'll see the person's location. So if we need to dispatch someone out to their location, or we do receive a transferred call coming back into the PSAP, we know where that caller is calling from. Now, let's talk about what I think is probably the most exciting scenario, and something really special because there's no other mapping product out there that can do this today, and show what happens if someone actually did call 911 and that call was picked up, but it was picked up from or by a different agency. So let's simulate a Google Android 911 call that came in right over there along Highway 1. We're investigating it within our PSAP. It showed up within our service area. And while we have this pop-up open, all of a sudden it changes. And we realize that, wait, that call has been answered by somebody else, some other 911 center. We receive a warning that says that. It tells us who it is. This is a demo environment, so that would normally be the PSAP's name. And the icon on the map changes to show a little handset to signify that it's been answered. It's a really big deal because now we know that we may have to dispatch resources, we may be receiving a transfer, and we have more situational awareness at hand than we've ever had before. So with that, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what the future holds for Radius and what the future holds for what we believe is tactical mapping and situational awareness tools in general. We're transitioning again, as Reinhard said, away from what we have in place today to what we're doing, in the future, bringing mapping from more quickly than ever before. We've talked about Apple and Google signals, but what other kinds of signals could there be? Certainly there's connected cars out there today with companies like OnStar. We can ingress those signals in, we can show them on the map in the very same way as soon as a car crash is detected. The little thing that looks like it came out of Star Wars, that is a IoT flood gauge sensor. That thing could emit signals that we could pick up directly if all of a sudden water rose over a certain particular threshold, maybe during a flash flooding event. Certainly panic button mobile apps like we see from OnStar and we see from Rave Mobile Safety and others can emit signals when someone hits that SOS button or the panic button, and those can be displayed directly on the map too. Same thing with automated alarms. That can address a lot of issues in the PSAP, cutting down the amount of time it takes to respond to an automated alarm. Alarm companies can send those directly over to RapidDeploy through ASAP to PSAP, through ADT and others. Because of that, maps will end up becoming three-dimensional. Maps themselves are going to change. Maps will have to adapt to that. We'll see them show up in 3D with basic and really highly detailed indoor floor plans to give proper frames of reference to the locations that we can get with these signals. Maps will also become elevation aware, not just indoors, but outdoors. As some of you know, the FCC has some wireless location accuracy rulings that have been enacted and are in place. And by April 3rd of 2021, the top 25 cellular market areas or metro areas in the US will start to receive elevation data. We need to put that to work. So not only can we locate callers, but again, we can enhance situational awareness. We can do things like show real-time line of sight analysis. So if you have an active shooter situation, we can see where that shooter can or cannot see it. That's tremendous. And what it means is that taking location, taking data, and making sure that we're using accurate and up-to-date data can really move the needle. So instead of having stale data and poor location accuracy, we can take maps, frankly, that exist today in the lower right-hand corner out in the state of Kansas for their next generation 911 purposes, use all of those things together and create a platform that truly is a centric situational awareness platform that really will reduce response times and give public safety the leg up that it deserves.
Thank you, Brooks. Super exciting stuff.
Excellent. Well, Reinhard, we do have a few questions that I'd like to run by you here in the remaining 5 minutes that we have, and I'd certainly encourage attendees to submit more if you have them through the chat box query feature. We can go ahead and respond to those. But the first one I would like to ask is, Reinhard, why is the location for signals that we've shown today faster than the traditional call itself?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it can be explained with the kind of robust modern path that the location data travels on. So if you think of, let's say, your iPhone or an Android phone, as soon as somebody says 911, call, that location gets fired off. And because we're using a fully IP-based secure, transmission mechanism, that pin on the map drops pretty much instantly. Whereas if we have to go through the phone network and, God forbid, legacy selective routers and, all of the infrastructure that's still in place, it really can take a few seconds for a call to be answered and for a call to be kind of delivered to the right call taking position. So we're not involved in the call path. We're not handling the 911 call, but we can handle the supplemental data in a supplemental pathway, which just happens to be more modern. And I think a lot of the improvements that people were expecting with NG911 actually are coming from that supplemental data path. The information is no longer attached to the 911 call itself. the information travels outside of the 911 system. And then it really depends how good your mapping systems, how your CAD systems, your call handling systems are in terms of correlating the different sources together. We don't want to create a situation in which you have to look at one screen for the location from A, second screen from location from B, and then you process your data in screen C, right? We don't want to have that. The vision of unified critical response is that everything's integrated in one user experience, and you don't have to click, you don't have to manually re-enter information, you don't have the risk of making mistakes that way. So that's how I would answer that question, Brooks.
It's really great. Thanks, Reinhard. Another one, we have someone who's been using RapidDeploy Radius Plus for some time now, and they're really excited about it and would like to go ahead and light this feature up. How do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Some agencies already have it as of yesterday, and thank you to the PSAPs that were early adopters and helped us test this early on, and give us some feedback and all of that. That's always a big part of the process. But agencies that don't have it yet, which is the majority, because we just released it yesterday, just get in touch with your customer success manager, or if you're still in implementation, get in touch with your project manager. We're going to be switching on agencies in waves, and for some customers, there's a small addendum license agreement that needs to be signed, but it's nothing out of the ordinary, so that shouldn't be a big blocker. But we're ready. I mean, the software is released, the data is flowing. We just need to give everybody a chance to get trained on the new capabilities, make sure their staff is comfortable, and then make sure we have all the paperwork in place. But other than that, we're good to go. Get in touch with your customer success manager or your project manager.
That's great. I think we have time for one last question. We had someone write in that at their PSAP they have a cell tower where about 25% of calls that are received on that tower have to get transferred, or they are simply misrouted. And they want to know, again, how can they tell when that other PSAP answers that call? Or how can the other PSAP understand when they answer a call?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different questions packed into one, but I think I'll answer the one aspect that I can in the 30 seconds we have left here. Is we are not just a provider of supplemental data that ingests information. We also have integrations with the call handling equipment. So because of the edge device that we have deployed in every 911 center that we serve, and often that's across entire states, we see every 911 call, and we're able to tell if it went somewhere else. So because our customers, for instance, is the California Office of Emergency Service and not an individual PSAP, or the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council and not an individual PSAP, we're able to see the big picture of where did the call even go. So again, this is an example of unified critical response, putting it all together, one integrated user experience. It's not about how much data you have, it's about how you present it and how you correlate it.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Reinhard. I appreciate it.
Okay, I think we're out of time. So thanks everybody for your attendance. I'm sure there's more questions. We'll get back to you if you left your name. And yeah, please reach out and let's have a conversation. As you can tell, we're super excited about this and we want to roll it out to all of you.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Take care.